Yeah, a warm welcome from me as well. I'm Ralph, working for GoVet. That's a facility within the Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training, the German Office for International Cooperation in VET. Can you hear me well? Okay, thank you very much. And this lightning talk is, so GoVet is a cross-departmental facility to consult the German government, but also international partners on vocational education training and international cooperation. And this lightning talk is part of the bilateral cooperation of the German BMBF, the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, with their partners, the Department of Higher Education and Training, which is here as well with colleagues, fellows representing DHET. We would like to talk about skills and sustainability. Now, when it comes to transformation and skills, or in general to the transformation for sustainable living and working, we all know that even here in Germany, there's a hot debate about the social impact it has. Transformation is a chance, green jobs are a chance for the future economy. But it's also fraught with risks and jeopardies. I was listening to a conversation in the German Deutschlandfunk in the morning when it was exactly about this point. And we're talking here about wealth and prosperity and the dangers. This is all much more exacerbated when it comes to low and middle income countries. And the topic of how to manage a sustainable transition is a topic for the southern part of Africa as well. And with this, I would like to introduce our speakers to you. The first is Prisha Ramsarup. Prisha is a researcher from Wits University in Johannesburg. She's been doing, she's also affiliated with the network of research in environmental studies at Rhodes University, and her research is on learning pathways for sustainable development. She's been part of the research group that developed the first environmental skills plan for South Africa and coordinates the National Green Skills Project. And Prisha will take us into one of the examples in the agricultural sector, how in South Africa these things are tackled. Our second speaker, Charles Chikunda, is head of or coordinator of a UNESCO program called Sustainability Starts with Teachers. He also has an affiliation with Rhodes, the Environmental Learning Research Center, which is one of the top facilities in South Africa. And yeah, I would call Prisha to give it a start, and thank you for joining the session. Prisha, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to share some of the work that all our colleagues are doing today. And hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion. So my chat this afternoon is thinking about the skills development challenge in South Africa. And what I want to open up is that thinking with a just transition. When we think about a sustainability transition, we need to think about it as being just, okay? And I'll tell you why that's so important now, okay? So a just transition lens on how we think about sustainability within skills development is critical in South Africa as well as in the rest of Africa. A sustainability transition that is just, we would say, needs to have environmental considerations, it needs to have social considerations, and it needs to have economic considerations. So those, and integrated environmental, social, as well as economic intent needs to be at the heart of the sustainability transition. And this may seem trivial and simple, but I'll give you a very good example. In the last 5 years, South Africa has seen among the biggest growth in renewables in the world. It's not a good stat because our base was extremely low to start off with, okay? But alongside that, it has left poverty and inequality intact. It has done nothing. That's a very clear indication that the directionality of the transition that we're on, the energy transition that we're on, is actually wrong. And there's no justice. So it left, the energy transition was leaving justice behind. The rich were getting richer, the poorer were actually more. So what we were trying to do, and what we're really struggling with, and what and the work that we're doing at our center arguing for, is how we bring justice into the center of a sustainability transition. A sustainability transition is not about substituting coal for renewables, okay? And VET in Africa and in other parts of the world, I've just come from a European network discussion on vocational education. In other parts of the world, the energy transition is viewed as substituting the technology, okay, with leaving out the justice element of it. And we've been struggling with what does this mean? How can it work, okay? And if we put justice in the middle, it actually raises very important questions. It raises the questions of how do we think about skills planning? Skills planning is always thought from a top-down way. We produce what the market needs. That's where the demand is, okay? But a just transition is forcing us to turn this on its head and actually think from a place, think from a bottom-up approach. So it's not just companies, but a range of participating organizations in a community. How do we turn on its head the way we think about skills development in Africa? So in the work that we've been doing in this program, which is called VET Africa 4.0, you can actually find it on the internet, which has been looking and researching for the last 5 or 6 years, what will an African approach to vocational education and training mean? And what will be at the center of an African vocational education and training mandate? And what we've been working with is VET has always been interested in the relationship between working and learning. And what it's always left out is the fact that those VET institutions are in communities where people have to live and they have to have livelihoods. So we've been working with the idea of putting living, working, and learning at the center of what it is that VET needs to work with, and trying to look at that from a bottom-up approach, and trying to see what does living, working, and learning in a community actually mean, and what then are the implications for vocational education institutions as anchor institutions within those communities. And if we start to think that way, it raises important questions about learning, okay? What approach to learning, then, do we actually need? And there are many and multiple in the very short time that Ralph has given me. I'm not going to discuss it. But we've all heard about transformative learning. We've heard about transdisciplinary learning. We've heard about people learning together and co-engage knowledge. We've been working with the idea of transgressive learning. Learning that actually disrupts the norms, okay? Because what you need is something to disrupt the kind of profit productivist mandate, which is the value center of VET in its current form. So we've been working with the idea of explicitly challenging normalized practices and to remove them from the center of the VET agenda. So I want to share very quickly an example of a learning innovation, because that's what. So what would this mean then? What role can VET institutions play in communities? How can we think about a VET institution within its community? You would know that water is a precious resource in Africa. We're a dry continent, okay? So whenever people try to tell me about digitalizing work, I always tell them the biggest threat to work in Africa is water. Okay, our next war is going to be about water in Africa. So water resources and land is scarce. In South Africa, we're giving people land to farm, but there's no water. Okay, so where you are now is you have community VET colleges, as well as agricultural colleges, that are teaching a curriculum about monoculture and commercial agriculture in communities that can't farm, that need subsistence farming. So simple knowledge around rainwater harvesting, farming without water, What are the opportunities to farm without water? So we went through a process. How can vet colleges update their curriculum? How can we involve the community? How can this be a transgressive, all of the above that we've been talking about? And how do we start to work with it? So we worked with a group of colleagues, and I will give credit to the Environmental Learning Center, Rhodes University, in the Vet Africa 4.0 program, in a rural Eastern Cape, which is a rural part of South Africa, and one of the poorest areas in the country. We worked with a group of colleges. We worked with the colleges, agricultural colleges, universities, as well as community members, women in the community, shops in the community. Oh. I'm obviously going in the wrong direction now. No? Okay. And we worked with this idea is, can we catalyze learning that can be a process of transformation that links people, places, knowledges, and skills, okay? And what kind of learning this be? What kind of learning and agency do we actually need? All right? And we really tried to kind of, think critically, as a lame word, about how to approach this. And we set up the Amanzi for Food program. Hela, who unfortunately couldn't make it, she led the program at that stage in this example. And it was a boundary-crossing vet innovation that developed within a sustainability paradigm. It's called Amanzi for Food, okay? But yes, it is located in the agricultural system, but what we were searching for was an innovative way to work with colleges within a community. And what types of learning, what could we learn about transgressive learning that could shift communities and the roles that colleges could actually play there? So, do I still have time, Ralph? 1 minute, okay. So, over 5 years, what we looked at, we set up a learning network. The learning network was made up of colleges, the local universities, Rhodes University and the University of Fort Hare, the vet college, the agricultural colleges, members from the community, the local economic development office, and they all participated. So one of the first mediating strategies that we actually used was to establish a learning network. Then we established a course-activated network. So everyone that was there participated in a course on rainwater harvesting and farming without water. But the course was each group of people were engaged in activities. There were education officials that were engaged in activities related to them. There were college lecturers, there were community members, and the course activated learning for each of those groups, okay? The next mediating factor, so change laboratories, course activated knowledge management, and then the productive demonstration sites. Within the community, each of those groups were involved in productive demonstration sites within their community. So they were involved in change projects, and Charles, I'm sure, is going to tell you more about change projects. They were involved in, as part of the course, engaging change, this thing within the community to get rainwater harvesting to work, okay, and to sustain it. And then they looked at expanded how the mediating roles that each of that group could then play. So I'm sorry I'm saying this going through it quite fast. But what we learned through this process of working with this is the mediating mechanisms that we needed to actually work with the college and the different groups to get the learning network function. And the learning network now is functioning on its own. There's no university prompting it. There's no one else. They have a community learning network that has social media channels. They're on community radios. They have now expanded and are supporting community learning in 5 different areas, both in the Eastern Cape as well as in Mpumalanga. Okay, so I don't think it's a start of a story of how we start working with institutions and the communities that they are within differently. I think that's my last slide. Ralph is telling me to stop. And stop. Yeah. So thanks, guys. I think I tried to show you something of of a dynamic mechanism of how the learning network was working. And the challenge is you can't talk about sustainability inside an institution if the institution is in an unsustainable community. Okay? So working with sustainability as part of the broader community is critical. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry.
Thank you, Prisha.
Well, yeah, thank you very much and good afternoon. My name is Charles Chikunda. I'm coordinating a program known as, can you hear me? A program known as Sustainability Studies for Teachers. It's running in Southern Africa across 11 countries from Angola to Tanzania. The whole idea is to support teachers and TVET educators integrating education for sustainable development in the curriculum, as well as supporting countries to come up with ESD-related policies. So I'm going to give you an example of one change project that came from Zambia, from a vet college. The reason why I pulled this example from 140 others is it has a very strong community support, livelihood support system in it. So, not moving. Yeah. The whole idea about sustainability, as Prisha said, is to look at the context of the community, the context of the curriculum, and then ask yourselves, what do we educate for? In this context, those who have been to Zambia, if you drive along the road, you see young people selling charcoal. What it means is they're cutting down trees and they get along the road to sell charcoal. You find the same in Malawi and so forth. So you cannot simply tell a person, please stop cutting down trees, and then they'll ask you, what will I eat? So the whole idea is to equip, as a vet college, to equip young people with skills to look for other sustainable livelihood support system. Now, this college went into the beekeeping project with the communities. The whole idea was to use the forest. Instead of young people harvesting the trees, they start harvesting honey. So, it's not moving. Anyway, I'll talk through it. I know it. So, what the college did was to go into the community, find the context of the community. Instead of conserving the forest without supporting them with livelihood, they started taking young people who had never had the opportunity to go to a TVET college, start bringing in the skills of bee farming. So in that sense, the college curriculum changed and it moved from the college into the community, where instead of having young people applying to come to the college, they went into the community where they wanted to conserve the forest and start to work with local communities. We already had some elderly people who were already looking at bees, harvesting, making honey, and so forth. So it went on like the college moved its walls from the college to the community, started getting the local knowledge on bees, how you can make beehives, and how you can improve on beehives, then how you can make sure that the honey that is harvested is sold. It moved from purely making hives or bees to economics. How do you support the economic of a community, the economics of a community, with this simple shift from making a living from selling charcoal to making a living with supporting beehives and supporting bees. Now, what this has taught us is, whenever we're supporting education systems, we always have to ask ourselves, what do we educate for? And we look into our curriculum very deeply. Is the curriculum still supporting the people the way we want people to be supported, or the way that they want to be supported? Now, lessons learned from this change project is that as UNESCO, we bring one participant from an institution for a course of what ESD is all about, the objectives of the what do you call them, the SDGs, and all those. Then that particular individual goes back to the institution and works on what we call a community of practice. That is influencing other people in the same department, making sure that they got all the sustainability issues, and then broaden the scope of what we call sustainability. I'm told by Ralph my time is up. Thank you so much, Ralph.
Bring it to an end.
To an end. So in summarizing, there's constant need to revisit the college curriculum, looking at the three pillars: environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. More often than not, as Prisha said, we focus mainly on, am I going to make money out of this? Forgetting about the people. This morning, I think the talk was all about cash and cash and cash to the people. So such curriculum transformation, I think if they are done at a global scale, we'll have cash and cash going to the people who were left out of the community system. Thank you very much. Wow.
Thank you, Prisha and Charles, for those insights into a Southern Hemisphere perspective on education for sustainable development and the challenges for community learning and TVET, of course. Now, the floor is open for questions from the audience, if there is any. Hand over to Mike.
Thank you very much, Danke, Kerle-Bocha, and I appreciate your presentations. And I would like to know what role do state agencies like ministry or departments of agriculture, forestry, whatever, play for your projects. Thank you.
You were talking about the South African perspective. Prisha, would you take the question, perhaps?
Hi, thanks for the question. I think that when you talk about a learning activated network or a learning network, the local departments are extremely important. The problem is that some of them, the levels of participation vary. So in the kind of idea of working with the skills ecosystem, both and government stakeholders at a local level as well as government stakeholders at the national kind of level are networked into the mapped people that should be involved in the learning network. But like everywhere in the world, levels of participation vary depending on individuals. Okay. And if you're asking the more political question of how high is sustainability on the agenda of our politicians, I'll defer to the real politicians in our group.
Maybe real politicians. Well, in Southern Africa, curriculum is transformed through policies. You cannot wake up and come up with your own curriculum. And by so doing, we involve a lot at the entry point. We ride on existing policies, for example, the water policy, the environmental policy, and we translate that into curriculum beings and doings. This one is a policy that was endorsed by SADC ministers for all the 16 countries that we pushed through this project. So they are now drawing from this policy. Thank you. Kialabor.
Are there more questions from the audience?
I would add just one kind of thing to it, is that Africa in general, South Africa in particular, has got great environmental policies. Our education and training policies and implementation is about 10, and this is not my statistics, it's actually from the ILO, is about 10 to 12 years behind in terms of implementation of environmental policies. So we're about 10 to 15 years behind skills development in relation to the environmental goals that we've set ourselves.
Are there more questions from the audience? If not, Prisha, I would like to ask you another question. With the challenges you mentioned of outreach from TVET into colleges. So you delineated how what the role of communities, of ecosystems, you mentioned as a word. But what's the proper role actually of TVET institutions? What should be the provision of TVET colleges, which are the backbone actually of the South African TVET system with regard to a transformation towards sustainability? And what might be the role of companies? How would you rate this? Is there what should be done to make them an active part of this transformation agenda?
Such an easy question, Ralph. I'm going to ask our colleagues from TVET if they'd like to give a response as well to it. I think there are many ideas. If there's a solution, it doesn't exist as yet. I mean, I don't think anyway. But I think there are many roles, depending on the context, there are many roles in terms of how companies and the colleges can work together to look at sustainability. Okay. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is we know the least about environmental jobs at intermediate level, okay? So working with companies, one of the things I'm busy with, is trying to understand how people can learn a stream of work and actually transition differently, okay? The other role that colleges are playing in terms of, as they are studying, making their curriculum more sustainable, is to actually look at work processes and to actually do workplace learning things with companies, which is something else I've seen happening at one. So I think they also can reimagine themselves as just an institution that provides for the company. They can also be a driver of change, and that's what I'm arguing for. I think they can be a driver of change, not just in their community, but as well as to the workplaces that they work. Companies on their own are not going to transition. We can see that. The UK did a massive company survey last year. About 90% of those companies, 1,800 companies participated. 90% of them said they have no idea of the implications of net zero on work processes within their company. And TVET institutions can be a driver at that type of level, especially with local companies or with companies in terms of understanding. In terms of their role in community, I think they are important anchor institutions. The fact that they have multiple challenges, and I fully acknowledge that, and they are not well-resourced, I think that they have to imagine their role. We had the best story yesterday. Listening to Henry talk about his college and how his college is working with the community. I think the one, if I have to say one sentence only, Ralph, and you should know I don't say one sentence, is that they need to reimagine their role as serving industry. The role's bigger than that. Okay, they can be a driver. They have to drive sustainability within industry.
Thanks a lot. That's all the time we have. Ralph, do you have some closing words?
No, thank you very much. Thank you to Prisha and Charles. And I think that's also a mandate for bilateral cooperation to keep in touch on these issues, because sustainability is also a global thing and a thing of international cooperation. Thank you very much, and thank you to Republica for having us.
Thanks a lot. Big round of applause for our speakers, please.